The night she said never again. I was checking our home security footage for a package delivery when I saw it. My wife Claire, standing in our bedroom at 2:15 p.m. last Tuesday, talking animatedly on the phone while I was at work. But it wasn't what she was saying that stopped my heart. It was what she was doing. She was packing a suitcase, carefully folding clothes I'd never seen before. Expensive lingerie with the tag still on, a red dress I definitely hadn't bought for her, and she was laughing. The kind of happy, excited laugh I hadn't heard from her in over 2 years. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust, and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. 3 weeks earlier, Claire had delivered what felt like a death sentence to our marriage. We'd been watching TV when I reached for her hand, something that used to be natural, automatic between us. She'd pulled away sharply and said the words that would haunt me. "Don't touch me." I'm done with all of that. Forever. When I asked what all of that meant, she'd been brutally clear. Physical intimacy, affection, pretending I want things I don't want anymore. I'm not interested in being touched by you or anyone else. That part of my life is over. But the security footage told a different story. This wasn't a woman who'd lost interest in intimacy. This was a woman preparing for intimacy with someone else. I rewound the footage, watching my wife of 9 years pack what was clearly a romantic getaway bag while I worked 60-hour weeks to support our lifestyle. The timestamp showed she'd spent 2 hours in our bedroom trying on outfits, practicing poses in the mirror, even dancing a little to music I couldn't hear through the silent video. This was the same woman who hadn't touched me in 3 months, the same woman who claimed she'd lost all interest in physical connection. The same woman who'd made me feel like a perverted monster for wanting basic affection from my own wife. I saved the footage to a private folder and called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had some investigating to do. The first clue was her phone bill. Claire had always handled our accounts, claiming she was better with details. But now I logged into our cellular provider's website and found something that made my stomach drop. Hundreds of texts and calls to a number I didn't recognize. All of them occurring during my work hours, some lasting over an hour. I reverse searched the number. It belonged to David Chen, a divorce attorney with an office downtown. But these weren't business hours calls. They were happening at 11 p.m., during lunch breaks, even at 6 a.m. before I woke up. What kind of legal consultations happened at midnight? I dug deeper into our financial records, something Claire had always discouraged me from doing. "You handle the career stuff, I'll handle the money stuff," she'd always said. "We each have our strengths." What I found was systematic financial preparation for divorce. She'd been moving money from our joint savings into a personal account for 8 months. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers that coincided with my recent bonus and promotion. But the most damning evidence was a credit card I'd never seen before. The statements showed charges that painted a clear picture. Expensive restaurants, hotels, a jewelry store, even Victoria's Secret purchases that had never made it to our bedroom. Claire wasn't just planning to leave me. She'd been dating someone else while making me feel like a desperate loser for wanting intimacy from my own wife. My hands shook as I printed everything. Bank statements, phone records, credit card bills, the security footage. The woman I'd been mourning the loss of, the woman who'd claimed she'd simply evolved past physical needs, had been living a double life. But I needed to know who David Chen really was. The divorce attorney angle didn't make sense with the timing and frequency of their communications. I drove to his office building during lunch, parking across the street like some amateur private investigator. At 12:30 p.m., I watched Claire walk out of the building, not from the law offices on the 3rd floor, but from the medical practice on the ground level. David Chen wasn't a divorce attorney, he was a plastic surgeon. I followed at a distance as Claire walked to an upscale restaurant 2 blocks away. Through the window, I watched her sit across from a man I didn't recognize. Tall, athletic, expensive suit. He stood when she arrived, kissing her cheek with the familiarity of established intimacy. This was her 1 p.m. lunch with Rachel that she'd been having every Tuesday for months. I took photos through the restaurant window, watching my wife lean across the table, touching this stranger's hand, laughing at his jokes with an animation I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The woman who claimed she'd lost all interest in physical connection was practically glowing with romantic energy. But the plastic surgeon visits, what was that about? That evening, Claire came home with the same indifferent energy she'd maintained for months. "How was work?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Fine. How was lunch with Rachel?" "Good, we're planning a girls' trip to Miami next month." The lie rolled off her tongue so easily it made me nauseous. "Miami sounds nice. Just you and Rachel?" "Yes, just us. You know how she is about her dramatic single life? She needs someone to keep her grounded." I nodded, filing away another piece of her deception. "How long will you be gone?" "A week, maybe 10 days. Depends on how much fun we're having." "A week to 10 days?" With her mysterious lunch companion and her suitcase full of new lingerie. "That's a long time," I observed. Claire finally looked up from her phone. "Is that a problem? You're always saying I should get out more. Do things that make me happy." The manipulation was breathtaking. She was using my attempts to support her against me, twisting my encouragement into permission for her betrayal. "Of course not. I want you to be happy." She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given me in months. "Good. I'm really looking forward to it." That night, as Claire slept beside me, I made my plan. If she wanted to play games, I'd play better. The next morning, after Claire left for what she claimed was a yoga class, I called David Chen's office. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I told the receptionist. "My wife has been seeing Dr. Chen, and I'm interested in similar procedures." "Wonderful. What type of enhancement are you considering?" "Enhancement." My blood ran cold. "Whatever my wife, Claire Mitchell, has been discussing. We'd like to coordinate our treatments." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Mitchell. Dr. Chen has been so excited about her transformation. The breast augmentation and tummy tuck combination is going to look amazing. She's scheduled for next Friday." I nearly dropped the phone. Claire was getting plastic surgery, major cosmetic surgery that would require weeks of recovery, surgery she'd never mentioned to me. "And the gentleman who's been coming to her consultations," I continued. "My wife mentioned he might be interested in procedures as well." "Mr. Harrison?" "Yes, he's been so supportive throughout her process. It's wonderful when partners are involved in these decisions together." "Mr. Harrison," not her lunch companion's real name, but close enough for me to work with. I hung up and immediately hired a private investigator. Within 6 hours, I had a full report on James Harrison. Recently divorced, owns 3 luxury car dealerships, and had been dating my wife for 10 months. 10 months. While she'd been rejecting my every attempt at affection, she'd been in a full relationship with another man. While she'd been claiming she'd lost all interest in physical intimacy, she'd been planning cosmetic surgery to look better for her lover. But the timeline raised another horrifying question. If she was getting surgery next Friday, and her girls' trip to Miami was the following week. She wasn't going to Miami with Rachel. She was going to Miami with James Harrison to recover from surgery he was paying for, while I sat at home believing my wife was healing from a medical procedure I knew nothing about. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. She'd return from Miami with her new body, probably file for divorce shortly after, and start her new life with James while I was left wondering what I'd done wrong to drive away a woman who'd simply evolved past physical intimacy. But Claire had made one critical error. She'd underestimated the man she was betraying. I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence that would make her manipulation look amateur. Phone records, financial statements, medical appointments, even hotel reservations she'd made with James for their post-surgery vacation. But I also did something else, something that would turn her betrayal into the biggest mistake of her life. I called my lawyer. Friday morning arrived with Claire acting unusually nervous. She claimed she was having lunch with Rachel, then going to a spa for a relaxing afternoon. "I might be late tonight," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Rachel wants to try that new wine bar downtown." "Have fun," I replied, kissing her forehead. "I love you." She flinched slightly at the contact, just as she had for months. But today would be the last time. At exactly 10 a.m., while Claire was going under anesthesia for surgery her boyfriend was financing, I filed for divorce. By noon, I'd emptied our joint accounts, money that was legally mine to take. By 2 p.m., I'd changed the locks on our house. By 4 p.m., when Claire's surgery was finishing, a process server was waiting at the hospital with divorce papers and a restraining order. I'd also done something special for James Harrison. I'd sent him a package containing printouts of every text message Claire had sent me over the past month, expressing her love and commitment to our marriage while planning her secret surgery and affair, including the ones from last week where she'd written, "I can't wait to start fresh with you, but I need to handle Marcus carefully. He's been suspicious lately, and I can't afford for him to mess this up before I'm ready." Same messages where she'd called me clingy and pathetic and described how easy it was to manipulate someone desperate for scraps of affection. But the real masterpiece was the final document in James's package, medical records showing that Claire had been taking birth control pills throughout their entire relationship, despite telling him she wanted children with him someday. By 6 p.m., both Claire's affair partner and her secret were destroyed. My phone rang at 7:30 p.m. Claire's number, probably calling from her hospital bed. "Marcus, what the hell have you done?" Her voice was groggy from anesthesia, but sharp with panic. "I gave you exactly what you wanted," I replied calmly. "Freedom from a marriage you'd already left emotionally. You can't just change the locks. This is my house, too." "Actually, I can. The house is in my name only, remember? You insisted on that for tax purposes 3 years ago. Turns out that was excellent advice." I could hear her breathing heavily, probably trying to sit up in her hospital bed. "James won't answer my calls," she said, her voice breaking. "What did you do?" "I introduced him to the real you, the one who calls him useful but temporary in text messages to your friends. The one who's been lying about wanting children while secretly taking birth control. The one who describes your affair as practice for the real thing once the divorce money comes through." Silence. Then quietly, "You read my messages?" "I read everything, Claire. Your financial planning, your surgery arrangements, your post-divorce timeline with James. Very thorough. I especially enjoyed the part where you calculated how much alimony you thought you'd get from your emotionally distant husband." "Marcus, please." "You were right about one thing," I interrupted. "You deserve better than what our marriage had become. But so did I. The difference is I was willing to work on it. Work on... You were willing to lie, cheat, and steal while making me feel like a monster for wanting basic affection from my own wife. I can explain." "You explained perfectly in your messages to James. You called our marriage a comfortable prison and said I was too weak to leave on my own." "Well, congratulations. You were wrong about the weak part." I hung up and turned off my phone. 3 days later, Claire was released from the hospital to an empty house and a reality she hadn't planned for. James had blocked her on all platforms and was reportedly dating his physical therapist. The surgery she'd hoped would launch her new life had instead marked the end of the only security she'd known for 9 years. My private investigator delivered the final report a week later. Claire had been living a completely fabricated existence for almost a year. The yoga classes were actually hotel meetings with James. The girls' nights out were romantic dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford. Even her claims about losing interest in intimacy had been strategic, creating distance while she planned her exit. But the most devastating revelation was in her journal, which she'd left behind in her panicked departure. Page after page of calculations about my earning potential, my emotional weaknesses, how to maximize her settlement while minimizing her own financial contributions to the marriage. She'd written, "Marcus is so desperate to be loved that he'll accept any excuse for rejection. The intimacy withdrawal is perfect because it makes him blame himself instead of questioning me. Meanwhile, James gives me everything I actually want. Best of both worlds until I'm ready to trade up permanently." 6 months later, I received a handwritten letter from Claire. She was living in a studio apartment, working at a coffee shop, struggling to pay her medical bills from surgery that had been repossessed when James stopped covering her payments. The letter was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as an apology. She claimed she'd been confused and going through a phase. She said she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to work things out. But buried in the emotional appeals was the real message. She was broke, alone, and wanted access to the comfortable life she'd thrown away. I wrote back with just one line. "I'm no longer interested in that part of my life. Forever." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same words she'd used to end our intimacy, I used to end any possibility of reconciliation. Today, I'm engaged to someone who appreciates genuine connection over manipulation. Someone who sees partnership as building together rather than strategic resource extraction. Someone who makes me feel desired rather than desperate. Claire taught me something valuable. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. But she also taught me something more important. My worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. The woman who claimed she'd evolved past physical intimacy had just been evolving past me. The difference is, I evolved too, into someone who won't accept love as a transaction or intimacy as a favor. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly how little they value you. Because once you stop trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it, you become available for someone who can't imagine withholding it. The last I heard, Claire was still working at that coffee shop, still living in that studio apartment, still paying off surgery she'd hoped would launch a new life that never materialized. Sometimes people text me asking if I feel sorry for her. I don't, because feeling sorry for someone implies they're a victim of circumstances beyond their control. Claire wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own destruction, someone who confused manipulation with intelligence and cruelty with strategy. Real intelligence would have recognized what she was throwing away. Real strategy would have focused on building rather than betraying. And real strength would have addressed our problems honestly instead of constructing elaborate deceptions. But I'm grateful now for her betrayal. Not because I enjoyed the pain, but because it forced me to recognize that I'd been settling for scraps when I deserved the whole meal. The man who begged for affection from someone who withheld it as punishment no longer exists. In his place is someone who understands that love isn't something you have to earn, beg for, or prove you deserve. It's something freely given between people who genuinely value each other. And once you experience that kind of love, you can never go back to accepting anything less. If this story resonated with you, wait until you hear about the woman who discovered her husband's business trips were actually family vacations with his secret second wife and 3 children. Hit that subscribe button, because the most devastating betrayals are always the ones hidden behind the most ordinary lies. And trust me, after 9 years married to a master manipulator, I've learned to spot deception in places most people would never think to look. The next story will teach you exactly what to watch for.